tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammang sanghang namasami. Blessings, good evening. They say the two hardest things about practicing meditation, the first thing that's hard is starting. The second thing that's hard is to keep going. One way the Thai Ajahns talk about what you're aiming for in meditation is to develop a sense of satisfaction or fulfillment in what you're doing, which is something that you get both from the feeling, the good feeling, you become more calm and relaxed, partly from the meaning of what you're doing. It's something that's worthwhile, meaningful for you. The word in Thai is pojai, which translates as satisfaction, contentment, happiness. It's the same word you might use, say, if you do a job of work and you complete that job. Or if you eat some food and you've had enough, you're full. So that's another aspect of it. It's that we say fulfillment, or your mind feels full from the meditation. You get your mental food, the various skillful qualities, good qualities that arise as you practice meditation, make you feel full in the mind. As opposed to when we're stressed, when our mind feels something is missing or lacking, it's not content, so we keep thinking and mentally struggling, trying to solve problems and get things sorted in our mind, and we want this and then we don't want that. A bit like when you're physically hungry, it's agitating to the body because you don't have enough energy, or you're using the energy of the body because you haven't put food in your stomach. Or similarly, if your mind is stressed, it means you've lost some of the qualities that you gain from meditation, such as mindfulness, effort, sense of ease, sense of goodwill, sense of well-being. They may have gone when you're more stressed. So practicing meditation is helping to fill your mind up with the good qualities, bring this sense of satisfaction. One aspect that helps is having a meditation object that you feel satisfied to use, to work with. In meditation we have to start with a technique, even though we're training the mind ultimately to go beyond all attachment to techniques and methods and so on. But still, in the beginning you need some kind of method to train the mind. So we need to have a sense of confidence in that method or technique or in the meditation object, so that you're willing to put attention on it and use it. So there has to be a certain satisfaction in that meditation object. The best way you get that is if you've practiced before and experienced more inner happiness and calm from using that meditation technique, well, then your doubts and questions about using it will disappear because you know it works. And if that's happened before, you can remember that, so you have more trust, more confidence in the meditation object, such as mindfulness of breathing, for example. If it's ever brought you to a state of calm, your attention goes inwards and you're not feeling stressed, mentally agitated, worried, angry, not desiring things outside of yourself at that time, well, it's a very special kind of peace, inner happiness, and you tend not to forget it. So then you get more trust in the meditation object. So that's the best way to gain this sense of satisfaction with your meditation object, is practice and experience a peaceful mind. If you haven't done that yet, then one thing that helps is a teacher or somebody more experienced in the meditation. They suggest something to you, saying this may work, this may help you. And if you have confidence in the teacher that they know what they're talking about, or they're peaceful, they're happy in themselves, then at least you might be willing to try with that meditation because it seems to have worked for someone else. It could be the Buddha himself. So we know from the Buddha's life story that he practiced with, say, mindfulness of breathing, although he discussed other techniques for calming the mind and developing states of samadhi and insight. But he used mindfulness of breathing, and he'd done that when he was a little kid. 7-year-old sitting under a tree while his father, the king, did a ceremony. That in itself indicates probably the Buddha had been practicing mindfulness of breathing for many lifetimes, because he sat down and started practicing it without a teacher. It was a kind of natural thing that his mind brought up for him. Nevertheless, he practiced that later on under the Bodhi tree when he became enlightened, and then they say the Buddha practiced mindfulness of breathing quite regularly through his life, even though he was already enlightened. Once he was enlightened, fully awakened, sometimes he'd just dwell in the peace of mindfulness of breathing, because he was beyond stress. He didn't get stressed, worried, angry. So when you have no more stress, well, there'll be times when you don't have to do much, maybe. So then the mind would go to the breathing and the peace, the rapture, the happiness of mindfulness of breathing. So sometimes we have to rely on the teacher or the Buddha, but best of all is actually from our own experience. If we've tasted a bit of peace, then that will give us confidence, say in the case of mindfulness of breathing, to keep using it, even though sometimes you're not very peaceful, or it seems like hard work working with your mind. You have some inspiration from what you've done before. So we say that will give you this sense of satisfaction or contentment to be using the breath as a meditation object. But some people find other meditation objects work for them, so it could be contemplation of the body, so the 32 parts of the body, or the 4 elements. Some people recollect death, the theme of death, the object of death. Some people recollect the Buddha. It makes them very happy just to think of the Buddha, or focus their mind recollecting the Buddha, maybe reciting Buddha or Buddha or Buddha, or reciting the words of the qualities of the Buddha, Iti Piso Bhagava Arahang Samma. So there are different meditation objects, techniques that we can use, and the idea is to find one that you're satisfied with. Even if you're not immediately peaceful or mindful, you're willing to use it. If you're using mindfulness of breathing, then the first task is to put your attention on the breath, to keep the breath in mind, keep your mind with the breath. You could say to think of the breath, but when we say think of, we don't mean so sit there trying to describe the breath to yourself or form an idea about it or an opinion, but simply that part of the mind which is normally thinking. You're giving it the task of knowing the breath. So they say, lifting the mind up to the breath. And the word in Pali is vitaka. And you'll notice when you're trying to practice mindfulness of breathing, you lift your mind to the breath, you put attention on the feeling, the sensation of the breath for a little while, and then your mind wanders away to something else. So it's as if it falls down. That's perhaps why they use the word lifting up. You lift it up to the object, in this case the breath. But when you're not mindful, not aware, not putting effort in, your mind will go to something else which is more habitual or seems more important to the mind. You start thinking about the past, the future, other things. So it's as if it falls downwards, away from the breath, for as long as you have lost your mindfulness. But then each time you re-establish mindfulness, you're putting your mind back on the breath. So you lift it up to the breath. And the idea is to keep it there with the breath. We say sustaining the thought of the breath or sustaining attention on the breath. That's the second factor of samadhi, vichara. It means you have mindfulness, sati, with the breath. When you have no sati, then the mind drops away from the breath all the time to other things. And so you get the normal state of mind just thinking one thing after another, a lot of it seeming random, or sometimes stressful, unhappy, sometimes boring, or whatever. But the mind drops away. But when you keep your mind with the breath, because you have mindfulness, you're paying attention, then we call this vichara. So already the mind has a certain steadiness to it. There's a continuity of effort coming from the effort you put to lift the mind up to the breath, and then it's staying there because you're mindful, as long as you're mindful. And of course mindfulness can fade very quickly, so you have to start again, bring it back. But there may be periods where mindfulness is more continuous. So we say we have vitaka, vichara established. And of course when you are with the breath, knowing the breath, you get to know it, you become familiar with it. Its qualities, it's long, it's short, subtle, refined, coarse. You're getting to know your own breathing, the rhythm of it, how fast or slow it is, what that feeling is, what the sensations are surrounding with it, what they're like. At first that can be disturbing. You practice mindfulness of breathing, often you get itches and reactions in your body because you're becoming more aware of your body in a more focused way. Normally we don't even notice itches because we're thinking so much. But the main thing is if you're mindful with the breathing, then you get to know what the breath is like. You may notice changes in the breath as you're meditating. Most likely is it will slow down a bit and become more subtle. The mind seems to kind of become softer. And as it's less caught into distraction, it starts to feel better. Because distraction agitates the mind, makes us feel mentally uncomfortable. Whereas mindfulness, clear comprehension, effort, these kind of wholesome qualities make us feel good. So they're the cause for piti to arise. And piti means rapture, enjoyment, interest in the object. It's no longer boring. Doesn't mean to say you won't have any pain or discomfort, but in the beginning you're trying to establish your mind by lifting it up onto the breath. But you can also struggle with different moods, different states of mind, maybe feeling bored, but when rapture arises, it means your mind is steady enough, body and mind is settled enough. You're not bored, you're not distracted. So they call piti the mental food of the mind. And it's a kind of happiness, inner happiness, not dependent on external things. Even more subtle and steady kind of happiness is sukha, the fourth factor of samadhi. We say sukha vedana, the pleasant feelings that come when body and mind are settled, focused on the breath, merging with the breath, knowing the breath. There may still be other thoughts and feelings popping into the mind, memories pop up, but they don't really bother you if you're already feeling happiness and enjoying the breath as an object of meditation. You're not bored, you're not irritated, even if you have some pain in the body, say. Where the mind really becomes undistracted, unwavering, is with one-pointedness, which arises out of this good feeling of happiness, physical and mental happiness. The mind becomes one-pointed, undistracted, and it's quite content for periods of time just to stay with its object, know the object. And the piti and the sukha, the different factors of samadhi, can become more intense periodically, partly depending on the body and how you feel, whether you're healthy or well or ill, whether you're tired or strong or whatever. But with one-pointedness, the mind can stay within itself, with its meditation object, without being distracted by anything else. We say it's gone beyond the 5 hindrances, which are normally agitating the mind, taking the mind's attention. Sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and anxiety, and then skeptical doubt. These 5 hindrances disappear with one-pointedness. So the mind becomes much brighter than usual, because it's not distracted, it's not sending its energy out with different mental states, thinking about this and that, it's not stressed, not even bothered about pain or different sounds, different things that are normally might be distracting. It's happy. It's not sleepy either, even though very relaxed but not sleepy. And we say it's in the best position or the best state to observe the 3 characteristics: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. We say anicca, dukkha, anatta, in both physical and mental phenomena. Because the mind is in this state of, it's not distracted or not easily distracted. It's peaceful, it's happy, doesn't want anything else. So then it can look at things in a very kind of unbiased way. A lot of our suffering and stress comes from craving and attachment that we don't see, we don't recognize it and how it affects the mind. But when your mind is more one-pointed, then you can see how you're getting attached maybe to a certain way of thinking, certain way of reacting to things, mental habits, different beliefs, opinions that we hold. They become clearer to you when your mind is one-pointed, because the way they cause suffering becomes obvious. You say if it's sensual desire, you can see there's something you want, there's something you feel, this is good, I need this, I want this. But when your mind is calm, steady, you also have an inner source of happiness that doesn't need that thing, that object or that feeling. So then you can compare what's going on in the mind and say, oh, well, maybe I don't need that thing that I'm desiring. Or even look more deeply and say, well, the thing I desire is impermanent and I can't really keep it anyway, even if I get it. Nothing lasts. And the mind can accept that understanding because it's calm. Sensual desire manifests in many ways, the obvious ones, things you like, things you want, different kinds of desire, often associated with the body, sexual desire, desire for different kinds of pleasure and food and drink and sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. But also ideas. We like to attach to ideas that make us feel good. So maybe ideas about things we want, states that we want. I want to get this and then I'll be happy. When I get the income level I want, get the house I want, get the person I want, get this position in my life, the status, the security, the this, the that. Sometimes even we think about future lives. When I get to heaven, then I'll be happy. There's always something you want. When your mind is one-pointed, maybe you can contemplate that and see whether the actual wanting is suffering, because you're not peaceful, you're not satisfied anymore when you're caught into wanting. Whereas if you already have a state of happiness, then you can say, well, I've already got this happiness. Why do I need that thing? Why do I need to think about the next life, or when I get this job, or when I get that money, or when I get this thing that I think will make me happy? You've got a way of comparing, looking at it more deeply and realizing, well, maybe it's not really a source of happiness, that thing. Maybe it's actually a source of suffering, all this searching and seeking. So we are encouraged to develop one-pointedness by training the mind in meditation objects to develop this sense of inner fullness or satisfaction, because then it helps us to observe and clearly see the way things are, rather than always follow our biases of liking and disliking what we think is good and right and what we think is wrong and bad. Seeing more the nature of mental states and feelings in this body. So I'll encourage you all to keep up with your meditation. when you can, keep putting effort in. But I'll say just this much for tonight.